The night my mother died, my father didn't just bury her memory, he buried me with it. And before the rain stopped falling that night, I became a homeless orphan standing outside the only home I had ever known. I'm Joshua Morgan, and before I was a man of rank, before I wore this uniform that commands respect, I was just a boy with nothing but a mother's love to keep him warm. My mother, Amelia Jackson, was the only light in a house filled with shadows. She was the one who told me I was special, even when my father looked at me like I was a stain on the carpet. But the day the light went out, my world turned pitch black. I remember the smell of the hospital, bleach and sorrow. I held my mother's hand as her pulse faded. My father, Tyler Bennett, stood at the foot of the bed with his arms crossed. He didn't shed a single tear. He didn't even look at her. He looked at his watch. To him, her death wasn't a tragedy, it was a scheduled vacancy. When the monitor flatlined, he simply turned and walked out. He didn't wait for me. He didn't comfort me. He just left. I spent that night crying by her bedside until a nurse told me I had to leave. When I finally walked back to our house, the house my mother had filled with flowers and laughter, the locks had been changed. My bags, 2 tattered suitcases filled with my cheap clothes and the few books my mother bought me, were sitting on the wet pavement. The door opened just an inch. My father's face appeared, cold and hard like granite. "You were her project, Joshua," he said, his voice devoid of any human emotion. "She's gone now, and I'm done wasting resources on a boy who has no spine and no future. You're useless. You're worthless. Don't come back." "Dad, please," I whispered, my voice breaking. "It's raining. I have nowhere to go." "Then find a gutter," he snapped, and the door slammed shut. I sat on my suitcases as the rain began to pour, soaking through my thin jacket. I looked up at the windows. My sisters, Mia Anderson and Charlotte Thomas, were standing behind the glass. I thought, for a second, they might help. Maybe they'd sneak me a key or a blanket. Instead, Charlotte drew the curtains, and Mia simply turned her back. They had always followed my father's lead. To them, I was just a weak link. I wasn't the athlete my father wanted. I wasn't the shark-like businessman he envisioned. I was just Joshua, the boy who liked to paint and read poetry with his mother. I walked that night. I walked until my shoes were ruined and my feet bled. I ended up in a park, huddled under a slide, shivering as the cold seeped into my bones. For weeks, I lived like a ghost. I ate scraps. I slept in shelters when they had room, and on the concrete when they didn't. Every time I looked at my reflection in a store window, I saw the worthless boy my father described. I started to believe him. The hunger was a constant ache, but the loneliness was a sharp blade. I'd see families walking together, fathers ruffling their sons' hair, and I'd have to look away. Why wasn't I enough? Why did they hate me so much? I was at my lowest point, sitting outside a recruitment office just to stay in the shade of the building's awning, when a pair of polished black boots stopped in front of me. I didn't look up. I expected to be told to move along, to be called a vagrant. "Son," a deep, resonant voice said. "That's a lot of fire in those eyes for someone who looks like they've given up." I looked up. It was an army officer. He didn't look at me with pity. He looked at me like he was scanning a map, looking for a path. "I'm not your son," I muttered, hugging my knees. My father made sure of that. "I'm worthless. Ask anyone." The officer knelt down, ignoring the dust on his uniform. "I don't ask people about who you are. I look at who you can become. You've been through hell, haven't you? Most people would have laid down and died by now. But you're still sitting upright. You're still breathing. That's not worthless. That's resilient." He held out a hand. "I'm Colonel Vance. I see something in you, boy. I see a fire that just needs a little oxygen. You want to stay here and prove your father right? Or do you want to come with me and prove him a liar?" That was the moment my life split in two. The old Joshua died in that park, and a new man began to stir. I took his hand. I didn't know then that I was stepping toward a destiny that would make the world tremble. I just knew I wanted to survive. The transition wasn't easy. In fact, it was a different kind of hell. Basic training broke what was left of the soft boy. I was pushed, beaten by the elements, and forced to face my own limitations every single day. But every time I felt like quitting, when my lungs were screaming for air during a 20-mile march, I'd see my father's face. I'd hear Charlotte's laughter as she shut those curtains. I'd hear Mia calling me useless. That pain became my fuel. While other soldiers rode home to their parents, I wrote letters to myself. I told myself that I would never be small again. I would never be at the mercy of someone else's cruelty. Years passed, and I didn't just survive the army, I mastered it. I found I had a mind for strategy, and a heart that didn't know how to beat in retreat. I climbed the ranks faster than anyone in my division. I was deployed to the most dangerous corners of the earth. I saw things that would make a normal man lose his mind, but I was already forged in the fire of betrayal. Nothing out there could hurt me more than my own blood had. I remember one night in a desert outpost, under a canopy of stars. I was a captain then. I received a small package from a private investigator I'd hired years ago, not because I missed my family, but because I wanted to know when the time was right. Inside were clippings and reports. My father, Tyler Bennett, had expanded his real estate empire, but he had done it through shady deals and massive debt. He was a king sitting on a throne of toothpicks. Mia had married a man just as vapid as her, living a life of superficial luxury built on our father's crumbling credit. Charlotte was struggling, her own arrogance having driven away anyone who actually cared for her. They were all still there, in that big house, pretending to be royalty while the foundation rotted. The report also mentioned that they had officially declared me, presumed dead, to settle my mother's small remaining estate, money she had intended for my education. They had stolen my mother's final gift to me to pay for a new car for Charlotte. That was the night the last bit of Joshua died. The boy who wanted their love was gone. In his place was a commander who only understood justice. I didn't rush back. I waited. I grew stronger. I became a legend in the Special Forces. My name, Commander Joshua Morgan, became synonymous with precision and power. I earned medals that I kept in a drawer, and scars that I wore like armor. I became a man of such influence that I could move mountains with a phone call. But I never forgot the rain. I never forgot the cold. Back home, my family's luck finally ran out. My father's business dealings caught up with him. He was facing foreclosure, lawsuits, and total ruin. He needed a miracle. He needed a benefactor, someone with enough power to sweep his crimes under the rug and inject enough capital to save his name. He started reaching out to high-ranking military officials and government contractors, begging for a meeting with the legendary Commander Morgan, who was rumored to be overseeing the new regional development and security contracts in their state. He didn't know who Commander Morgan was. He thought he was reaching out to a savior. He didn't realize he was reaching out to the boy he had thrown into the gutter. I arranged the meeting. I wanted it to be at the old house, the one they were about to lose. I wanted to see the fear in their eyes before they knew who I was. I arrived in a motorcade, the sound of heavy tires on the gravel echoing like a drumroll. I wore my full dress uniform, my chest heavy with the medals they said I'd never earn. As I stepped out of the car, I saw them. They were lined up on the porch, looking pathetic. Tyler, Mia, and Charlotte. They were dressed in their best clothes, trying to look important, but they smelled of desperation. "Commander," my father said, bowing his head slightly, his voice shaking with a false humility. "It is an absolute honor to welcome a hero of your stature to our home. We are humbled by your presence." He didn't recognize me. The beard, the scars, the sheer physical presence of a man who had led battalions, it had erased the scrawny boy he once knew. I stood there, silent, letting the tension build until the air felt heavy enough to choke them. I walked past them into the house without saying a word. I went straight to the living room, to the spot where my mother's favorite chair used to be. It was gone, replaced by a garish, expensive modern sofa. "Where is the velvet armchair?" I asked, my voice deep and cold. My father blinked, confused. I'm sorry, Commander? That old thing? We threw it out years ago. It was junk. Please sit. We have so much to discuss regarding the Bennett estate. I turned to look at Charlotte and Mia. They were smiling at me, that fake, predatory smile they used on people they wanted things from. "You both look so comfortable," I said. "It's a shame that comfort was built on the bones of a woman who actually loved you." The room went silent. My father cleared his throat, a nervous sweat breaking out on his brow. "Commander, I'm not sure I understand the connection. We are here to talk about the future. My family." "Your family?" I interrupted, stepping into the light. "You don't have a family, Tyler. You have a collection of people you haven't discarded yet." I slowly reached up and removed my hat, placing it on the table. I leaned in close to my father, until we were eye to eye. "Look at me, Tyler. Look at the useless boy. Look at the worthless son." The color drained from his face so fast I thought he might faint. He peered into my eyes, searching for the child he had abandoned. It took a few seconds, but then the realization hit him like a physical blow. His jaw dropped. "J. Joshua?" Mia let out a small gasp, her hand flying to her mouth. Charlotte staggered back, her eyes wide with terror. "The commander is you?" Charlotte whispered. "The commander is the man I became because you left me with no other choice," I said, my voice vibrating with a decade of suppressed rage. "I came here today to see if there was even a shred of regret in this house." "But you didn't even recognize your own blood. You were too busy looking for a handout." My father fell to his knees. Literally. He grabbed at my trousers the same way I had grabbed at his doorframe years ago. "Joshua. Son, we didn't know. We were told you hadn't made it. It was a mistake. A terrible mistake. Please, you have the power to save us. One signature, and the bank backs off. For the sake of your mother. Don't you dare speak her name." I growled, and the sheer power in my voice made him recoil. "You used her death as an excuse to purge me from your life. You stole her legacy to buy cars and jewelry. You didn't care if I lived or died in the rain." I looked around the room. The bank isn't backing off. In fact, I've already purchased the debt. This house no longer belongs to the Bennett family. It belongs to the United States Army Veterans Fund. It's being converted into a halfway house for soldiers who have nowhere to go, men who actually have honor. "You're throwing us out?" Mia shrieked. "Where are we supposed to go?" I looked at her, and for the first time in my life, I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness. Just a cold, hard peace. "I believe there's a gutter nearby. My father said it was a good place to start." I walked to the door, my boots clicking firmly on the hardwood. "Joshua! Wait!" My father cried out, sobbing now. "We're your family!" I stopped at the threshold, the same threshold where I had been left in the rain. I didn't turn around. "A family is built on love and sacrifice. You are just people who share my DNA. And as of this moment, even that is a connection I'm severing." I stepped out onto the porch. The sun was shining. It was a beautiful day. My security detail stood at attention as I walked to the lead car. I looked back one last time to see my father, Mia, and Charlotte being escorted out by the sheriff's deputies I had brought with me. They were carrying their belongings in trash bags. It wasn't about the revenge, not really. It was about the balance. The world has a way of leveling the scales. They had tried to bury me, but they didn't realize I was a seed. I sat in the back of the car and took a deep breath. I felt my mother's presence then, not in the house, but in the strength of my own hands. I wasn't the broken orphan anymore. I was a protector. I was a leader. The moral of my story is simple: never let someone else's definition of you become your reality. They called me worthless, and I became priceless. They called me useless, and I became essential. The fire they tried to extinguish was the very thing that forged my soul. As the car pulled away, I looked at the gate of the estate. I didn't feel like a winner of a war. I felt like a man who had finally found his way home. And this time, I held the keys. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the channel. Your support means everything and motivates us to bring you more powerful stories. Drop a comment below and tell us which part of the story you like the most. And stay tuned, the next story is coming soon, even more intense and emotional.